morning, everyone. Once again, welcome to Introduction to Logic, Deductive and Inductive Reasoning. We are now at our ninth week, and for this week, our topic is proposition, conditional proposition. So it is a continuation topic in our week 8, all about proposition, but we are going to focus on conditional proposition. So for this week, we will define conditional proposition, also identify the antecedent and consequent proposition, and articulate the importance of proposition in one's life. So let's proceed to our discussion. So we have here the hypothetical proposition. So the hypothetical proposition is a compound proposition which contains a proposed or tentative explanation. A compound proposition consists of at least two clauses connected by conjunctions, adverbs, and so on and so forth, which expresses the relationship between the clauses as well as our assent to it. So the clauses are simple propositions of the AEIO variety. So again, the AEIO variety signifies affirmative and negative proposition. So for AE, we have the affirmative proposition, IO for negative proposition. So looking back to our lesson, A is for singular and universal, and E is for particular affirmative proposition. I is for singular and universal affirmative proposition. Meanwhile, for O, it is particular negative proposition. So the conditional proposition. The conditional proposition is a compound proposition in which one clause asserts something as true provided that the other clause is true. So the first clause is the if clause and is termed the antecedent, and the second clause is the then clause and is called the consequent. So we have in our example, if typhoons come, then crops will be destroyed. So the antecedent is if typhoons come, and the consequent, then crops will be destroyed. So that's the difference between the antecedent and consequent. If the antecedent is followed by for if, and the consequent is then. So basically, the if and then are the connectives and indicates that if the antecedent is true, then the consequent must be true as well. What is important is the sequence between the two, that is, the must flow with logical necessity into the consequent. So it doesn't matter whether individually the antecedent or consequent is true or false. What matters is the relationship between them. So basically, if the antecedent is true, so the consequent must be true as well. And if the antecedent is false, so does the consequent must be. So there must be a relationship sequence between the two of them. So let's have here the proposition, if all men are equal or created equal, then Mario, Ben, both being Filipino, should be both executives in the same company. So we could see the antecedent is true. So if all men are created equal, but the consequent is regarded as false, because if false, even if the individual clauses may be considered true, as it does not follow the universal notion of equality be narrowed down to particular notions of nationality and job equality. Another, we have a proposition sentence. If all men are not created equal, then both Mario and Ben, who are not Filipinos, cannot be aspirants for executive positions in the company. So this is true, but the individual clauses are false. Again, we have here if and only if, unless equivalent to, if not, provided that, on condition that, and in case that. So these are the usual signs of conditional proposition. However, when they are synonymous with either when or although or granted that, so they do not assert a condition or a conditional proposition. Also, on the other hand, they might not appear in a proposition which correctly states a condition. So let's have here an example sentence. So the proposition, if his father is a military man, then his son is a radical activist. Means actually, although his father is a military man, his son is a radical activist. This is not a conditional proposition. So the proposition, drink a bottle of ice cold cola, drink right after a long hike under a hot sweltering sun, and you'll get very sick. So this one is a conditional proposition. So in the first sentence, it is not a conditional proposition because the clause we are using is although. Meanwhile, um, in the second sentence or the proposition that we have, the clause that we are using is um, right after a long hike and you'll get very sick. So this is a conditional proposition. So, as well as a proposition sentence that we have, do not pay your full tuition fees and you will not receive your grades, because they are both in the same sequence and they have a relationship. So, the antecedent and the consequent have a relationship. So, basically, if in that case, on condition that, provided that, so these are the ushers in the antecedent, and even if the antecedent comes after the consequent in the sentence, so while only if determines the consequence. So examples of antecedents: if it rains, then we shall have an abundant harvest this year. We shall have an abundant this year if it rains. Another example: in case that one grantees change his mind, you will get a scholarship. Also, you will get the scholarship in case that one of the grantees change his mind. So another one is, on condition that you do not preach insurrection or rebellion, you have nothing to fear from detention in Camp Crame. Or you have nothing to fear from detention in Camp Crame on condition that you do not preach insurrection or rebellion. So we have here some examples also of difference between if and only if. So if he loves you, then he will show it in words and gestures. So this is an antecedent, and he loves you only if he shows in verbs and gestures. So this is a example of consequent. So again, if, so these are the difference. So if he loves you, if the if clause is in the start of the sentence, so it is a form of antecedent, and only if is for the consequent. So I will show you a short video explanation regarding about conditional proposition, but this is a highly broad explanation of our week 9 lesson. But I would like to share to you to for you to able to more understand our week 9 lesson proposition.
Today, I will talk about conditional propositions as one of the types of compound statements used in symbolic logic. And in the same manner as I discussed the other types of compound statements in our previous editions, I will also focus on the nature and characteristics of and the rules in conditional proposition. And I will also provide an example on how to determine the truth value of a conditional proposition. So, to begin with, conditional propositions are compound propositions connected by the words if then or just then. And as we learned in the previous discussion titled Propositions and Symbols Used in Symbolic Logic, the symbol for if then is horseshoe. Consider this example. If it rains today, then the road is wet. P, Q. And so that if we let P stand for it rains today and Q for the road is wet, then this example is symbolized as follows. P, then Q. Please note that the proposition that precedes the connective horseshoe is called the antecedent, and the proposition that comes after it is called consequent. Please note as well that there are cases wherein the words if then is not mentioned in the proposition, yet the proposition remains a conditional one. Consider this example. Passage of the law means morality is corrupted. PQ.
I'm here in the biggest trading floor located in the heart of BGC Taguig. One thing I've learned as a currency trader, pwede tayong kumita ng pera sa Forex no matter the status of our economy. Whether the market is up or down, you can earn money. Hindi katulad ng stock market na when the price drops, you lose money. And Forex market ay may uncapped earning potential. Yes, you heard it right. There's no limit. Anyone can learn how to trade with the right education and right mindset. Gusto mo bang matuto how to trade in the Forex market, potentially maging passive secondary income mo to? Here's your opportunity. I will be hosting a brand new web class at ipapakita ko sa inyo kung paano maging profitable trader. I'll share my techniques at ituturo ko sa inyo ang favorite trading strategy ko called trend rate. By following this trading strategy and applying these trading methods, I become Learn to Trade's top trader of the year. I call myself as a lifestyle trader. I do what I want when I want it. Kung gusto mong malaman kung paano kumita ng pera sa pamamagitan ng Forex trading, do yourself a favor and click on the link somewhere around this video to register on my webinar. It's a free online live web class. O paano? Kita-kita na lang tayo sa webinar ko.
Now, if we analyze the proposition, it is very clear that it is a conditional proposition because it suggests a cause and effect relation. Thus, the proposition can be stated as follows. If the law is passed, then morality will be corrupted. Now, if we let P stand for the law is passed and Q for morality will be corrupted, then the proposition is symbolized as P, then Q. Another important thing to note is that sometimes the antecedent is stated after the consequent. Now, if this happens, then we have to symbolize the proposition accordingly. Let's take this example. Morality would be corrupted should the abortion law is passed. PQ. If we analyze this proposition, it is clear that the antecedent is abortion law is passed, and the consequent is morality would be corrupted. Hence, the proposition morality would be corrupted should the abortion law is passed is symbolized as Q, then P. Again, as I already pointed out in my previous discussion, the variables provided after the proposition represent the propositions in the entire proposition respectively. Thus, in the statement, morality would be corrupted should the abortion law is passed, PQ. The variable P stands for morality would be corrupted, and Q stands for abortion law is passed. Again, since Q is our antecedent and P is our consequent, and since in symbolizing conditional propositions, we need to write the antecedent first and then the consequent, so the proposition morality would be corrupted should the abortion law is passed would be symbolized as follows. Q, then P. Now, let's proceed to the rules in conditional propositions. So, the rules in conditional propositions state that a conditional proposition is false if the antecedent is true and the consequent is false. Thus, other than this form, the conditional proposition is true. Now, let me illustrate this point in a truth table. And so if P is true and Q is true, then P then Q is true. If P is true and Q is false, then P then Q is false. And if P is false and Q is true, then P then Q is true. And if P is false and Q is false, then P then Q is true. As we can see, the rules in conditional propositions say that the only instance wherein the conditional proposition becomes false is when the antecedent is true and the consequent is false. Let us consider this example. If it rains today, then the road is wet. Now, the first row in the truth table says that P is true and Q is true. So, obviously, P then Q is true. This is because if it is true that it rains today, then it must also be true that the road is wet. Now in the second row, it says that P is true and Q is false. So P then Q must be false. This is because if it is true that it rains today, then it must necessarily follow that the road is wet. However, it is said in the truth table that Q is false. That is, the road is not wet. Hence, the conditional proposition is false. Again, it is impossible for the road not to get wet if it rains. Now the third row says that P is false and Q is true. Now if this is the case, then P then Q is true. And this is because if it is false that it rains today, in other words, it does not rain today, it does not necessarily follow that the road is dry. Because even if it does not rain, the road may still be wet. Because, for example, a fire truck passes by and spills water on the road. Now, lastly, the fourth row in the truth table says that P is false and Q is false. Now, if this is the case, then P then Q is true. And this is because, based on the example, it says, it does not rain today and the road is not wet. So obviously, the conditional proposition is true. Alright, that's it for today. Thanks for joining me today in this edition of our daily whiteboard.
So thank you for watching this additional video. So I will just send the link for this additional video that we have shown in our discussion. So this one is a broad explanation of conditional propositions or if-then statements. So let's go back to our discussion. We have here, in our discussion, we have In your handouts or PDF files, we have two activities, activity 1 and activity 2. But I will just only require you to answer activity 1, which is state if each proposition is conditional proposition or not. Then state if it is true or false. So we have here 10 items only. So state if it is true or false, and state if it is propositional condition, a conditional proposition or not. So thank you once again, everyone, and God bless. So from the book of Mark, chapter 9, verse 23, said Jesus, everything is possible for one who believes. So thank you once again, everyone, and God bless.